Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm the Campaign Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. Today's session is going to be a quick how-to on Storyline button sets. So I'm going to assume that all of you that are registered here are Storyline users, and hopefully you'll find something very, very useful here in managing your button sets. Today this session will be recorded. We'll get a copy of it sent out to everybody who has registered. You'll get a copy of that in your email. We'll also post a copy of this on our blog at a later date, so you can navigate back to that to find it if you need it later. If you have questions during the session, we'll be ready to answer your questions in the questions panel. It looks like a couple of you have already found that. So please do send your comments, questions through there, and we'll get to as many of your thoughts as we can. All right, so to talk to us about Storyline button sets, we have Amber Rodbell, Senior Lead Developer with us. She's on our custom team and does amazing work. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you, Amber, and I'm gonna pass the screen as well.
All right, sounds good. All right, so today we are going to talk about button sets in Storyline. And button sets have been around since I think Storyline 2, but surprisingly, when I asked a lot of developers, do you use them? Not a lot of developers use them or utilize them maybe in the best way. And it was funny because as custom developers, we would rather create 450 triggers to do the exact same thing because we kind of like to wow the world with that. So I want to show you how to utilize button sets in an effective way. And let me see here.
I see Storyline, so I think it worked. Thanks.
All righty. All right, so what is a button set? A button set basically is a tool that Storyline gives us to allow for any icon, image, or shape to become a button. So right here, I added our little fist pumps. And if I wanted to say, okay, I want these to become buttons, I can do that. And what's really nice, so you can grab it here, hit Control, and select multiple ones. Right click, you go to button set, you go to new set, and I can call it whatever I want. So whatever makes sense to me. I'm gonna call it hands at the moment. And what's nice is that now it's become a button set, and Storyline automatically gives you a selected state here. And if you've set up your theme properly, which for this presentation I didn't, it will make the selected state a color of your choice or a color that matches your theme versus this blue. So you automatically have a selected state, and right now you've basically turned these hands into questions. You could ask a question and have these indicate your answer. And then you can just show a layer or collect that information however you wanted to do it. So that's a plus about button sets, is that you can then create any kind of interaction with any shape or picture you want. So let's take a look at some examples of that. All right, so let's say that we have to ask 2 questions on a slide. We can do that, and we can even collect the information. So right here, I put 2 questions, and what I would do in this instance is I would convert it to a free form. I would choose Pick Many so that I can pick 2 of the answers. And then I would go in here and say, okay, well, my choices were yes, no, and efficiency, and they're fun to use. My answer is yes and efficiency. And so
Amber, real quick, there is a quick question. There's usually 4 states. How did you manage to select or choose only to have 2 states? So how did you make that adjustment when you were setting it up?
In a button set? So right. A button set only gives you the selected state. When you create a button set, it only automatically gives you the selected state. If you want to add other states, you would have to manually add them. A lot of times I feel like when you're utilizing these, you're really only, because you'll see later down in some other samples, you really probably only want a selected state if you're using it for like a question answer type of interaction. But for button states, they will, it's not like your built-in radio button that automatically gives you all the states, or different shapes that give you all the states. This is, the button set will only give you selected.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All righty. Now, let me see here. All right, my mouse is stuck here. All right. Well, my mouse is deciding not to move at the moment. So I will just, until it decides to move again, I will, oh, here it goes. All right, so here, what we did then is we had the ability to now go in here, and remember, I made 2 selections, the correct ones. And, oh, well, first I want to show you something else. First, we have to make these button sets, because I didn't do that because I wanted to show you. So first, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to button set, new set, and I'm going to say this is Q1 on slide 1. And then I'm going to say, okay, this button set, because I don't want, if they select yes, I don't want them to then be able to select no. And then if they select efficiency and development and they are fun to use, I don't want it to deselect the options from question 1. So then that's why each question has to be a different button set. So then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go to button set, new, and I'm going to say this one is Q2 on slide 1. Okay, there we go. And I've already selected what the correct answers will be, and that just is managing your feedback, your correct and incorrect layer. All right, so here we go. So now we can preview it and take a look. So now we have, again, the built-in selected state, and we can go yes, no, and it automatically will deselect the other buttons within that button set. And then we can also select the second question. And as you see, it doesn't deselect your top question because it's a different button set. And then we could hit submit. It was incorrect. And if we wanted to be correct, we could do it again. So does that make sense to everybody? You can then, what's great about this is that you could actually put, if you had a chart that you needed checkboxes across, like good, great, not so great, you could have checkboxes and each one could be their own button set so that you could have that all on one screen and then collect all the answers. So what that does is that it allows you then to use your freeform question tools and allows you to collect that answer and pass it on to the LMS. All right, so that is having multiple questions on one slide. Now I'm going to show you an example of having multiple categories on one slide. And so basically, you can allow the user to pick one selection out of each category this way. And so what you would do is you would just select your icons. And again, it's very simple. You're just going to select them all, right click. You're going to, wait a minute. So sometimes if you don't select it just right, they will not let you add it to a button set. And then further, sometimes in Storyline, because it likes to do this, you might actually have to do it individually. So you may say category 1, fruit, or something like that. And then you can click, and you see it already added the selected state. You'll click each one, and I can add it then to that category. It's this one that's the problem. And so just add them each to the button set. And what this is going to allow you to do is that then they can say, okay, so this person selected an apple, cabbage, and a popsicle, or whatever it may be that you needed to gain from this, but you can have categories with multiple selections. And then you can base your feedback on those selections. certain examples that you could use for this is it would depend on what kind of feedback you actually wanted to gain from this. But I like the idea of having multiple categories because it's a fun way to show icons and make things look more friendly, and they can select a lot of different choices that way. So this is your multiple categories. Now I want to show you using it with questions. Now, this is something we've thought a lot about, because how many times do you create your content and your SME then says, oh, do you mind just making that question a select all that apply, and add a couple extra, answers that they can choose, or the opposite, that they say, oh, never mind, we don't want to select all that apply. And in Storyline, if you don't set it up properly, you then have to go back and redo the whole question. So what we found is that if you create all your questions to be multiple response, then what you can do, they're all multiple response. What you then can do is, if it is a select all that apply, you do not put it in a button set, because then they can select multiple buttons. But if it is a select all that apply, I simply go in here and say, okay, well, I don't want them to be able to select more than one. And so actually it would be this one. And so you simply go like this, and you turn them into a button set. Doesn't like me grabbing them all today. There we go. All right, and so this one, as you see, it's Casey, which was for my knowledge check, and so it's a button set. And so I want to show you what happens. Because it's a button set, it doesn't allow you to select more than one. So there we go, and it turns it off. But yet this is still set up in Storyline as a multiple response. So then if the SME changes their mind again, you can just take off the button set. I could say, okay, they changed their mind. They now want it to be a select all that apply. I go to none. And then when I preview it, now they will be able to select multiple. So they could select several and then hit submit. So that's a nice benefit, that it allows you to set up all your questions as multiple response up front. And then it's no worries if your SME or whoever decides to change their mind and switch the type of question it is. You're not redoing the entire question. So that is my example for setting them up like that and utilizing button sets to control the select all that apply.
So
Now,
a quick question has come up on this one. Would you need to build your own feedback layers for that section?
No. So what I did with these is that I simply turned this into a freeform question, and it automatically populated the built-in feedback layers. Now you certainly can customize these feedback layers, but you don't have to build those. It's what I like to do most of the time. I try to use all the built-in features of Storyline, because I find when we control all of this, we can control all of this with triggers and not make this a free-form question at all. But then we have the opportunity that when we share our file, or maybe the SME or client uses the file, that it breaks on them and they don't know how to fix it. Whereas if it's all in Storyline, they can fix it and utilize those features a lot easier.
Okay, another question, is there a way to limit the number of choices they can select in a multi-select? Is that something that can be done with button sets?
No. I mean, it can't be done with button sets. It would have to be done with triggers. So you would have to have a trigger that said if they, and in any multi-response, well, let me see, before I say that. No. So no, there's not a way to do that. You would have to use a trigger. You would have to say that you would have to make each one of these have a variable, It could be as simple as, you know, A, B, C, D. And if A and B are selected, then deselect C and D, or whatever. You would have to have those variables in. You could also do like add, and so add 1 each time, and anytime it's over 2, like if you only wanted them to select 2, you could deselect everything or something like that. But you cannot control that with a button set. That would have to be custom triggers.
Okay. And then is there a way to manage button sets in a scene or an entire project? Is there somewhere that I can go and just see all of my button sets?
That's a good question. Not to my knowledge. I think that they are managed on each slide individually. You have to go into each slide, because you'll notice that when I go from one slide to the next, you won't even see the same button set selections. So if you go in here, I don't see the KC selection that I have from over here. So they're all like very slide specific to that slide.
Okay, great. Those are all the questions we have at this moment.
Okay. All right, so I wanted to show you another couple fun examples and reasons why we like button sets. One thing that button sets do really well is by we created these to be buttons. And by doing so, button sets allow that selection and deselection automatically, so that you're not saying, okay, when they've selected this one, deselect this. And you're not, helps us when we don't want to have visited states. So you click here, there it is. And then it automatically deselects the other buttons. So you can utilize them button sets to show your layers and to create fun little interactions with a button set. And it automatically deselects, and then you're hiding your other layers automatically, and it ends up looking really nicely. So this is just a fun example of using it in an interaction. And then this interaction is very similar. It allows you to do the same thing. And more often we find that lately people don't want visited states. They don't want people to feel like they can't go back through and select them. And button sets make that really easy, because as you click through, it's not changing to a visited state, and you can just click back through and it just goes to that selected state. And as you know, sometimes when we have visited states in Storyline, that wants to override all of our other states. And so you have to add triggers to say, oh, show the selected state. But with a button set, it will automatically show that selected state and put the selected state almost as the state that overrides versus the visited state. So this is another nice way to use a button set. All of these were in a button set just so that you could click through and see the different layers. All right, now one last example. And this is something that I, for a while, struggled with, because tab interactions, it would always show the visited state. And then I would have to put triggers to show the selected state. And so one day I had all these triggers in to do all these things. And a developer friend of mine was like, what are you doing? He's like, why aren't you using a button set? And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me try that. And it made the entire process so much simpler. So what you do, I already have here, because I actually want visited states, so we knew what tab the client had already seen, because we were going to control the next button that way. So we would select our tabs and basically turn them in here to a button set, and we're going to call this tabs. Okay. And we add that button set. And then what happens is that even though we've visited the tab and it shows it's been visited, usually without a button set, when you would go back here, it would act all funky and go from visited to selected to visited, and you could never really get rid of the visited. Whereas with a button set, as you click through, it now always will show what tab you're on in the selected state. So the selected state will always stay at the top of your selections versus the visited state staying kind of always there. So that has really helped with tab interactions to kind of show which tab they're on. So I like using those now for all of my tabs. So that's really it. This is kind of short and sweet to kind of explain a little bit and help you understand how some ways you can use button sets.
All right, we've got a few more questions here. Could you copy a button set from slide to slide if you're just going to use the same set, I guess? Could you move those around?
Well, kind of. I can duplicate this slide and it comes over, and then I can choose to turn it on or off. So if you duplicate the slide, yes. And if you duplicate, like if I just copy these buttons over, then yes. You're not really, you have to copy over the objects that are using it. So it's not like, so yes, you can copy them from slide to slide, but it's not like if I go to a blank slide, I'm gonna have to create, and I create new shapes or a new interaction, I'm gonna have to create a new button set. But if I wanna use like this same question slide, I just keep duplicating it, and automatically, if I have programmed it that it is like a select all that apply or not, the button set programming will already be in there until I tell it to either turn it on or off.
Okay, and can you show the states for the tabs that you did a few minutes ago?
Sure. So the states I built were just normal, selected, and visited. That's it. And these were just what I made.
Sure, sure. Do you have an example of an advanced use of button sets? Or is there one, or is this kind of it?
So the only thing that I've done that I would and I didn't include it here, but the only thing I've done that was kind of advanced, in my opinion, was like a matching game. So what I did is I had a set of cards up here and a set of cards down here, and made the different matches button sets. And so, well, I made matches button sets, and I made the tops and bottom button sets. So you could only select one from the top and one from the bottom, and when it flipped over, if it matched, it put it away, it hid it. And then so it was an easy way to use button sets for a matching game. So I definitely recommend, if you want to do like a matching game or fun interaction like that, that eliminated the need for a lot of triggers, because it allowed those button sets to control the tops and bottom selections and the matches. And you could even do it if you had 4 rows, you could have button sets on each row and have them interact that way as well. So that was the most complex kind of thing I've done with a button set that I thought was a great use of it, because matching games have always been a little bit difficult because you always have to add so many triggers and so many variables. So I thought that was probably the biggest win kind of with a button set.
One person asked, could you go back to the group use slide? Is the feedback you hope to generate based on which individual icons they click in the button set?
So for this one, it would be like, from this one, I was thinking about like if this were a client who wanted to tell the person, you know, let's say, and I don't know, I just like literally put icons in categories and really didn't think about it from an ID perspective. But let's say that someone wanted to put like bad foods, like 1 or 2 bad items in each category. And then they could say, you know, select the snack that's not healthy for you. and then their selection would be all the unhealthy items. And then they could hit submit and say, hey, you're right. You selected all the unhealthy items out of the categories. Or you could customize it and say, you know, you could have variables that would say, you know, what each one is worth. And you could say, well, if you had selected, like, depending on what you were selecting, 3 of things in this category, you get this feedback. And had you selected 3 things out of a mid category, you would get different feedback. So then you would build custom feedback layers, and based on their selections in a category, provide them feedback on that. It really would depend. This is not a great case study here because I just made it to show you categories, but it would really depend on what information you were trying to glean out of those categories.
Sure, sure. Going back to that tabs example, can the color of the visited state be changed?
Yeah, you can change whatever you want. So you could go here to visited and say, all right, well, we don't like gray, we want it to be blue, or whatever you wanted your visited state to be. You can change the colors of any of the states. It's really just pushing the selected state kind of always at the forefront.
Okay, excellent. Now, are the buttons, do they work well in mobile? This person says, one of my courses, I use the default buttons, and when I clicked on it on mobile, clicking it turns the button to the hover state. And I need to click again to show the clicked trigger. Is that just a bug with Storyline, or?
No, it actually works better for mobile because it removes the hover state, that your finger can't always determine whether you're hovering, like if you have a tablet, whether you're hovering or actually trying to select that. So in general with mobile, you shouldn't have a hover state, just because you're probably gonna have to tap twice. So it actually helps you with that because it only gives you a selected state. So if you want to add any others, you have to add them yourself.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the benefit of creating button sets for the tabs interaction? Why would you use button sets for that?
So let me show you. When it's not a button set, let's get rid of it, and I'll show you the difference. When it's not a button set, your visited state ends up overriding. So see how they're all turning into visited? And this has just been a Storyline issue, like from the beginning, is that this is what happens. All your states get all messed up when you're clicking on them, and it doesn't quite know what it wants to do because it's like, should I stay selected? Should I stay visited? And this has been a problem since the beginning. And so what we've always had to do with these is say, okay, when the layer pops up, we would control it and say, change tab 1 to the selected state, and change, you know, when the user clicks another tab, turn it to the visited state. Well, now you don't have to do any of that because as a button set, you don't have any of this funkiness going on, and it just automatically controls it a lot better. You'll notice, do you see, like, it goes from normal, I think that's our visited for that particular one, but it doesn't work quite the same. You have to always like double click things. So whereas when it's a button state or a button set, I'll show you, you'll see that instead it will always stay selected if you're on that tab. And that's the big benefit, is that when you're on a tab, you want to know you're on that tab. So now it's always staying selected. And even though it's showing that, hey, I visited that tab already, when I go back to it, it's selected. And that doesn't happen unless you use a button set. Well, it can happen, but you're just going to be writing a lot of triggers to make that happen on your layers. Does that make sense?
I think so. If you guys need more clarification on that one, please let me know in the comments. Someone has a kind of a more broad question. Consider a training in which you want a user to click on 2 or 3 areas on the screen, on a screenshot of a system before clicking submit. So you're trying to train them, you got to look in these 3 places before proceeding. Could you use a button set in this case, or would you recommend using a different approach?
So if it's system training and you want them to, well, you could probably, I mean, if you want them to do multiple areas, I think with your hotspot, you can only do 1, or maybe you can do 2. Yeah, you can do, yeah, you can only do 1. Oh, wait, add. Oh yeah, you can do multiple ones. So you would want to do, like, you could use these hotspots and add them in here. Now, I use a lot of freeform, even if I don't want to say they're correct or not. I utilize the freeforms to add the different hotspots just to control it. And then when they have clicked through each one, then instead of having tons of triggers to control that, what it would allow it to do is say, okay, well, I guess you'd still have to have 2 triggers that say, once these have been selected, show final feedback. But you really wouldn't want to use a button state for that unless you could. No, I don't think you would, because it doesn't work well for multiple selection. It's only going to work well if you only, unless you did 3 button sets. Well, you could do, okay, so you could do multiple button sets on the screen, but I don't know that that's actually going to help you reduce your variables or triggers. I think what you would want to do is, or how I would do it, let's say, is I would probably take, you know, maybe a circle, put it on the screen, and have a visited state. And if I wanted them to look at all these 3 areas on the screen, I would say, okay, lock my next button until they've clicked on each and they've turned to visited. And if they try to click on the next button beforehand, give them a little warning to say, hey, please visit each item before continuing. I think that's the better approach, because I don't think a button set for that is really going to help you or
Sure.
streamline the process.
Sure. Okay, we don't have any other questions about button sets. This has been very, very great and informative. Do you have something else you'd like us to show, Amber? Or can I grab the screen back for a minute?
You can grab the screen back.
All right, great. So I'm gonna show the right screen, which is this one. All right, so all of you Storyline users out there, which I think is everybody in the audience right now, if you haven't already, you can check out our asset library, which has Storyline templates. We've got these awesome course starters that can really just help you jumpstart into your projects. We've got stock assets. We've got like photos, music, sound effects, videos, all of these awesome things that are built out and available for you. And if you want to just kind of check out and see what we've got in there, what you might be interested in, you can grab 10 of them for free with a 7-day free trial. So give us a call at 801-796-2767 and we can set you up, or you can just visit eLearningBrothers.com, and right there at the very top of the page is register for a free trial. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning of this session that Amber is a member of our custom development team. So she's a part of this awesome award-winning team. I mean, we're making awesome training all the time using Storyline. We also use Lectoria and Captivate, and we're starting to use Domino a little bit, if you guys know anything about Domino. They are building the coolest things, and they're always open to have like a jam session and potentially help you through some projects that you may be working on as well. So you can give that number a call as well, 801-796-2767, if you'd like to schedule a jam session where you can, you know, say, here's the project that I'm working on, what kind of ideas or tips you have, or if you just need an extra set of hands, we can always help you out with some of your projects, or we can take over an entire project if that's what you're interested in doing as well. You can also find more information about that at eLearningBrothers.com, and in the top navigation you'll see custom development and or custom solutions. So you can check that out as well. I'm seeing a couple questions here about the trial. So the subscription cost is dependent on which of the libraries that you grab. So you can learn more about that at eLearningBrothers.com as well. And if you'd like to talk to one of our custom solutions executives about a jam session, depending on the depth of it, we may be able to just take care of that for you. So give us a call. Let's find out. Let's solve each other's problems here. And thanks for joining us. Thanks, Amber, for giving us this great information. And we hope to see you guys all next time.
Thanks.